Star Wars 7x7 episode 2098. There's breaking news about the High Republic Publishing Initiative. That's the project formerly known as Project Luminous, and the implications for this news could go so far as to reset the entire Star Wars canon. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, yeah, if we follow this through to a logical conclusion, this could mean that we are again resetting the Star Wars canon. Here we are about 6 years after the last reset of the Star Wars canon, which was in April of 2014. Let me explain how we have arrived at this point, because there are two particular elements that we need to bring into the conversation to frame this, to put this into focus, all right? First of all, we have to go all the way back to Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, and a pair of episodes, Wolves in a Door and A World Between Worlds. And I know that, that was years ago, so you probably don't need the spoiler warning, but, here it is anyway for Season 2 and Season 4 of Rebels. But Ezra Bridger goes into the world between worlds, and it's a place where time and space are all connected, and in particular, he is able to connect to the moment when Ahsoka Tano is fighting Darth Vader in the Twilight of the Apprentice episodes in Season 2 of Rebels, and how she is able to escape from Darth Vader is by getting plucked through a portal by Ezra Bridger, and she arrives in the world between worlds. And so that's how that happens, and that's our first appearance for the world between worlds, which is something that Dave Filoni actually discussed with George Lucas in preparation for those Rebels episodes. So this is a concept that Lucas is fully on board with. Now, the next puzzle piece that we have to bring into play is the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary. So Pablo Hidalgo has said in the past that there are all sorts of little Easter eggy things buried, particularly in the DK publishing books. For example, in the Rogue One guide, there was a reference to Crate buried in there, and that was actually revealed to be the planet where the climax of The Last Jedi took place. And at Celebration Orlando, I think it was, Pablo was on a publishing panel saying, oh yeah, they just announced the name of what that salt planet's going to be, and oh yeah, I had it for you in the Rogue One book a few months ago. So when a reference to the world between worlds shows up in the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary, well, there you go. That's another situation where we're dropping clues to things that are coming. This is something that's mentioned as part of the pages on the Sacred Jedi texts, and that there is an unattributed illustration in there that relates to what's called the world between worlds, or a Vergence Scatter. And that language, that particular phrase, Vergence Scatter, has not been used anywhere else, but it is our clue to what is going to be happening with the High Republic. And here's the last piece of foundational information you need, and it goes back to Star Wars Rebels as well. So you remember that I mentioned the two episodes were Wolves in a Door and A World Between Worlds. Well, the Loth Wolves that exist on Lothal are able to use the world between worlds. They are able to have a kind of hyperspace travel for all intents and purposes. They're not the only creatures that can do this. The Purrgil also have natural hyperspace capabilities, but in particular, the Loth Wolves are able to create hypertunnels for travel from place to place, from very rapid travel across long distances, but they're able to touch the world between worlds as well. And that is important when you hear the news about the High Republic situation, which is that the hyperspace event that happens, that kicks off everything in the High Republic, basically cracks the world between worlds. Now, so far, all we had been told was that the Nihil are the space Viking pirates that are the villains of this High Republic story, and there's been some discussion as to whether they are really the big bad of the High Republic series, and it turns out that they are not, because when the world between worlds gets cracked open, that unleashes an alternate reality for all intents and purposes, and it's not a very good one. It's a rather evil one, and not just an alternate reality, but variations on the characters that we have already met, who are going to spill from the world between worlds into this particular reality, into the galaxy far, far away's reality, and become the main bad characters. Because after all, the Jedi are heroes, and so when their alternate reality alternatives come through, they are not exactly Sith, but they are not exactly very nice either. After all, the Sith themselves, as we know, haven't been heard from for quite a long time, and so there's no reason to think that they will appear in the High Republic situation, but that doesn't mean that other Force-wielding bad characters can't appear and be a part of this whole thing. In fact, as it turns out, I have access to concept art of what these characters are going to look like. If you are checking out the video version of the podcast, I'm going to show them right now, and if you're checking out the audio version, well then please come over to sw7x7.com and check out the images. At the very least, it does look like it's going to be somewhat easy to tell the good version of these characters from the bad version, although it looks like, shaving a haircut in some cases ought to do it. Maybe some deodorant. I wonder what kind of space deodorant exists. But here's the thing. When you open the door to time travel, when you open the door to alternate universes, well, you open the door to resetting reality. I think about, for example, J.J. Abrams with the Star Trek reboot in 2009, where it basically created an alternate timeline. And so his Star Trek movies don't happen on the same timeline as other Star Trek movies that have happened. And so I suppose there is a situation where this creates a second Star Wars timeline, but there is also the possibility that it just resets the Star Wars timeline entirely. And so we pick back up from August of 2020 when the first novel, Light of the Jedi, is supposed to come out. At least that's when it's supposed to come out at this point. And there is one other bit of information that I have about this breaking news about the High Republic and potentially resetting the Star Wars canon. But before I get to that, I want to say thank you very much to Chris Maestro, who just became a patron of the podcast. And, again, it's humbling in general, but even in these times, it's especially humbling that somebody chooses to support me and what I'm doing here at Star Wars 7x7. And so, Chris, thank you so much for doing it. And for anybody who feels like they're able to do that at this time, and I totally understand if that's not the case, but, I will always be doing this, and it's always here for you for free. But if you want to support the work that I'm doing here in bringing a daily dose of Star Wars joy around the world, then please go to patreon.com/SW7x7. That's patreon.com/SW7x7. And as far as that last bit of news about the High Republic and breaking the world between worlds and possibly resetting the Star Wars canon, well, it's April Fool's Day. And if you couldn't tell that I was joking by looking at the High Republic concept art that has been very kindly marked up by Quizmaster Joe and Scorekeeper Declan, well, then here you go. Here's the official. Completely not true. The only things that were true in this episode were the fact that Chris Maestro became a patron of the podcast. Thank you again, Chris. And that I am doing my best to bring you a daily dose of Star Wars joy. And hopefully that is the case today and always. And so with that said, that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it. As always, that part is also true. And may the curve be flattening for you wherever in the galaxy you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.